The silver Audi glided smoothly along the cobblestone streets of Woodridge Heights, a quiet residential neighborhood where Judge Marcus Carter always found solace after grueling court sessions. The soft notes of jazz flowed from the radio, blending with the cool evening breeze, one of those rare moments when he could truly unwind. Suddenly, red and blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror. The sharp wail of a siren shattered the night. Marcus frowned. He wasn't speeding. His registration and license were in perfect order. So why? Maintaining his composure, he carefully pulled over to the side. The police cruiser rolled to a stop right behind him. A car door creaked open. A tall female officer strode toward him, her expression cold and unreadable. License and registration. Her tone was clipped. No greeting, no explanation. What was happening? Was this really just a routine traffic stop? Or was there something more? Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from. Share your city or country in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow, we'll bring you another inspiring story, crafted just for you. Judge Marcus Carter, a distinguished black judge, was driving home after a long, exhausting day in court. Woodridge Heights, where he resided, was known for its tranquility and safety, a sanctuary where he could escape the intensity of his profession. Here, amid the quiet streets and well-manicured lawns, Marcus always found a sense of peace after presiding over complex legal battles. Marcus was no stranger to adversity. Growing up in a neighborhood plagued by crime and systemic injustice, he had witnessed firsthand the brutal realities of discrimination. Yet, instead of succumbing to despair, he had let those hardships forge his resilience. From a boy who had to fight for every educational opportunity to a judge upholding the very justice so often denied to people like him, Marcus had defied the odds. He had become a symbol of hope, a testament to perseverance in the face of societal barriers. His newly purchased Audi, his modest reward after years of dedication, glided smoothly along the cobblestone streets of Woodridge Heights. The setting sun bathed the neighborhood in a warm amber glow, accentuating the peacefulness of the evening. Inside the car, the soft notes of jazz played from the radio, mingling with the gentle evening breeze. Marcus relaxed, savoring this rare moment of solitude, a brief respite from the weight of responsibility. This was his favorite time of day, a leisurely drive through familiar streets, reflecting on life, on his work, sometimes even forgetting the struggles that had shaped him. But Marcus had no idea that his peace was about to be shattered, thrusting him into a situation he had never imagined, right in the very community he called home. Just as he allowed himself to unwind, red and blue lights flared in his rearview mirror, illuminating the darkening streets. A piercing siren split through the stillness. Marcus furrowed his brow, perplexed. Had he inadvertently broken a traffic law? No, that was impossible. He had not been speeding, and his registration was in perfect order. Still, he remained composed, carefully pulling over in compliance with the flashing lights. The police cruiser came to a halt behind him. A tall female officer with a rigid posture and an icy expression stepped out. The nameplate on her uniform read Lauren Harper. Her movements were deliberate, her eyes sharp and unwavering as she approached his window. Marcus lowered the glass, his hand steady on the steering wheel, his demeanor calm. License and registration. Harper's voice was clipped, devoid of courtesy. Marcus hesitated for a brief moment, taken aback by her unyielding tone. Still, he nodded, reaching into the glove compartment for his documents. As he handed them over, his voice remained steady. "Officer, my name is Judge Marcus Carter. I live in this neighborhood, and this is my car. May I ask why I've been pulled over?" Harper barely glanced at the paperwork, her expression remaining unreadable. The lack of acknowledgement made Marcus narrow his eyes slightly. Something about this felt off. "Step out of the vehicle." The order was abrupt, devoid of explanation. "Officer, I don't understand. What have I done wrong?" He kept his tone measured, though a tight coil of tension was beginning to form in his chest. "Step out of the car. Now." Harper's voice hardened. Her hand hovered near the holster on her hip, a subtle yet unmistakable show of authority, a silent warning. A crushing weight pressed against Marcus's chest. He met Harper's gaze, searching for reason, for recognition. But there was nothing, only the cold indifference of someone who had already made up their mind. His title meant nothing to her. Or worse, perhaps she had heard it and simply chose to disregard it. Marcus inhaled deeply, forcing himself to remain composed. He knew all too well how easily moments like these could spiral out of control, how a single misstep could turn deadly. Too many stories had ended that way, and he wasn't about to become another statistic. "All right." His voice was calm, deliberate. "Slowly, Carefully, he reached for the door handle. Every movement was calculated, precise, designed to leave no room for misinterpretation. As he stepped out, the flashing red and blue lights cast shifting shadows across his face, illuminating the tension and the space between them. Harper's eyes never left him, not the gaze of an officer upholding justice, but the gaze of someone seeing not a man, but a threat. Unease crawled beneath Marcus's skin, but he willed himself to stay steady. He was a judge. He knew the law better than most. And yet, in this moment, it seemed no law could protect him. Not because he had done something wrong, but because of the color of his skin. Marcus stood still beside his Audi, the glare of the police lights throwing stark contrasts of light and shadow across his face, mirroring the turmoil within him. He could feel the weight of the moment, the unspoken accusation hanging in the air between them. The night around them was thick with a quiet hostility, an atmosphere so dense with suspicion it felt suffocating. He watched Harper's every move, his sharp eyes catching the slightest hesitation in hers. Not fear, not uncertainty, but something that looked an awful lot like anticipation. Harper lifted her radio, her voice sharp and detached, requesting backup. Suspect exhibiting suspicious behavior. Within seconds, the low hum of tension was shattered by the roar of an approaching engine. A second patrol car sped into view, its headlights flooding the quiet suburban street with an unforgiving brightness. From the driver's seat, Daniel Mitchell stepped out. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a rigid posture and an expression carved from stone, his presence alone enough to escalate the situation. His gaze swept over the scene with a practiced air of authority, but there was no curiosity in his eyes, no attempt to assess or understand. Only assumption. Harper strode toward him, whispering a few brief words. Almost immediately, Mitchell's gaze locked onto Marcus, a look not of inquiry, but of quiet condemnation. The atmosphere thickened, pressing down with an almost tangible weight. Then Harper spoke again, deliberately raising her voice so that Marcus could hear every word. This vehicle matches the description of an Audi reported stolen last week. A surge of anger flared in Marcus's chest. He forced it down. His expression remained composed, but his fingers curled into fists. Tension coiled in his shoulders as he willed himself to remain calm. "This is my car." His voice was steady, slow, each word carefully enunciated, as if trying to make them impossible to ignore. "I purchased it days ago. All documents and registration are valid. You can verify it in the system right now." Harper didn't respond. Instead, she glanced at Mitchell. A subtle, almost imperceptible cue. Mitchell gave a small nod. "Search the vehicle." The order landed with a chilling finality. Marcus's chest tightened. The slow-burning fire of indignation simmered beneath his skin, but he could not, would not, let it consume him. Not here. Not now. Because this wasn't just a confrontation. It was a battle for dignity in the face of a prejudice so blatant it burned. "I already told you." His voice was low but unwavering. "Run the registration. The truth is right there." Harper turned to face him. Her eyes were cold, her expression unreadable, but the faintest trace of derision lurked beneath her professional facade. "This is standard procedure, Mr. Carter." The way she said his name dripped with quiet mockery. She didn't see him as Judge Marcus Carter, a man who had spent his life upholding the very law she claimed to enforce. She saw a black man standing beside a car she didn't believe he deserved to own. Mitchell moved without hesitation, stepping toward the Audi and beginning his search. Marcus stood motionless, his eyes locked onto every one of Mitchell's movements. He tracked the officer's hands as they rummaged through the glove compartment, patted down the seats, swept under the dashboard. Each motion an invasion, an accusation. From the nearby houses, curtains twitched. Windows cracked open. Neighbors watched. A few lifted their phones, the glow of their screens flickering against the night. Recording, documenting, bearing witness. The humiliation sank deep, gnawing at something visceral inside Marcus. This wasn't just an insult. It was a public degradation, right here, in the neighborhood where he had spent years serving justice. Mitchell unlatched the trunk. The interior was nearly empty, save for a small black bag resting conspicuously against the clean lining. He lifted it, his gaze sharpening with suspicion. "What's this?" He turned to Harper. Marcus froze. He had never seen that bag before. "I don't know." His voice remained measured, but a flicker of shock bled through. "That's not mine." A faint smirk tugged at the corner of Harper's lips, a glint of satisfaction flickering in her eyes. "Not yours." She repeated the words deliberately, her tone dripping with disbelief. "Let's see what's inside." Mitchell placed the bag onto the hood of the patrol car, fingers moving toward the zipper. The air around them thickened, pressing in like an invisible weight. Marcus felt it, suffocating, inescapable. Each passing second pounded in his head like the relentless beat of a war drum. The zipper slid open. Inside, small sealed packets sat neatly stacked alongside a few loose sheets of paper and a receipt dated today from a nearby store. Marcus stood rigid, his entire body locked in place. "I don't understand." His voice carried an edge of something foreign, an unsettling mix of anger and apprehension. "This bag isn't mine. Someone put it there. Someone is trying to frame me." Harper folded her arms, skepticism etched across her face. "A suspicious bag appears in your trunk, and you expect us to believe it just magically ended up there?" Her voice curled with mockery. "That's quite the story, Mr. Carter." Marcus inhaled sharply, steadying himself against the fury threatening to break through. "You're accusing me without a shred of credible evidence." His voice was low but resolute. "Do you even realize where this is heading?" His jaw clenched, but he refused to waver. A judge, being treated like a criminal, on his own street. His words sliced through the air. "Do you really understand the consequences of this?" For the briefest moment, Harper hesitated. It was barely perceptible, just the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. But then, as if reminding herself of her authority, she straightened. "We're just doing our job." The confidence in her voice faltered. Marcus knew he couldn't stay silent, because this was no longer just about him. It wasn't about the car, or the bag, or even the humiliation. It was about a brutal, undeniable reality, one that countless others before him had endured. To be presumed guilty, to be treated as if they did not belong, simply because people like Harper and Mitchell had already decided who they were. Marcus locked eyes with Harper, his voice cold, his gaze cutting through her like a blade. "Go ahead, continue with this. But I promise you, this doesn't end here." His words carried weight, an unshakable certainty that sent a ripple through the charged atmosphere. "People are watching." He gestured subtly toward the growing number of neighbors, their phones raised, recording, capturing everything. "They're documenting this, and justice will never side with those who abuse it." The tension reached its breaking point. Harper remained rooted in place, her mask of confidence slipping as she became aware of the blinking lights from multiple phone cameras. Mitchell said nothing, his grip tightening around the bag as if it held the answer to a question he wasn't prepared to ask. The night air was thick with unspoken truths, and for the first time, it was not Marcus who felt exposed. It was them. Marcus didn't look away. He was ready for this fight because he knew this was no longer just about him. He stood motionless, eyes locked on the black bag sitting atop the hood of his Audi, a foreign object, something that had just been pulled from his trunk. For a brief moment, everything around him seemed muted, suffocated under the weight of his own racing thoughts. The only thing that remained was the storm brewing inside him. He didn't know where that bag had come from, but he knew exactly where this was going. Harper stood a short distance away, arms crossed, her posture rigid and unyielding. No explanation, no acknowledgement that she could be wrong. She exchanged a glance with Mitchell and gave the slightest nod. "Cuff him." Her voice was sharp, slicing through the air like a blade. Marcus felt as if he had been struck in the chest. "No, you can't do this." His voice rang out, firm but laced with undeniable shock. "I am Judge Marcus Carter, and I am telling you that bag is not mine. Before you act, you need to verify the facts. I demand it." Harper didn't respond. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she turned to Mitchell, her expression unwavering, silently pushing him forward. For a split second, Mitchell hesitated. A flicker of doubt passed over his face. But then, just as quickly, it was gone. He stepped toward Marcus, the silver glint of handcuffs catching in the flashing lights. "You have the right to remain silent." Harper's voice was flat, emotionless. It was a sentence Marcus had heard countless times in the courtroom. But tonight, it was being spoken to him. For the first time in his life, he understood the bitter sting of a false accusation in a way no law book could ever convey. "This is a grave mistake." His protest rose, his voice shifting from composed to burning with fury. "Call your superior, now. I demand a legitimate explanation for this." Harper remained impassive, as if his words meant nothing. "Be quiet and comply." There was authority in her tone, and beneath it, a hint of mockery. As the cold steel of the handcuffs clamped around his wrists, a different kind of weight settled into his chest. The red and blue lights from the patrol cars spun in chaotic circles, illuminating an injustice playing out for all to see. He wasn't afraid, but the humiliation burned like fire in his lungs. From the surrounding windows, neighbors watched, their silhouettes visible behind the curtains. The glow of phone screens flickered in the darkness, capturing every moment, every injustice, every second of this unfolding reality. Marcus knew they would remember this image, not as a respected judge, but as a man in cuffs, like a criminal being escorted under the flashing lights. Mitchell glanced at Marcus, something resembling regret flickering in his eyes, as if he too recognized the wrongness of the situation. But under Harper's authority, he had no choice but to follow orders. "Do you even understand the consequences of this? Do you know what you're doing?" Marcus's voice surged with the fury that had been simmering beneath the surface. "You are destroying the reputation of an innocent man, and worse, you're destroying your own career. You will be held accountable for this, Harper." For a moment, Harper hesitated. It was brief, nearly imperceptible, but it was there. She masked it quickly with a cold, dismissive smile. "This isn't personal, Mr. Carter. We're just doing our job." Marcus let out a sharp, bitter laugh. It cut through the quiet night like a blade. "Your job? You call this your job? A bag suddenly appears in my car, a car you didn't even bother to verify was mine. Is this your duty, or is it your bias leading the way?" Harper said nothing. Her eyes flickered, the unwavering confidence she had worn so well now fraying at the edges. Marcus's words had sliced through her defenses, through the self-assured armor she had wrapped herself in. She averted her gaze. Mitchell remained still, watching the exchange in silence. His eyes darted between Harper and Marcus, a growing recognition settling in. "Harper." Mitchell's voice was lower now, almost a plea. "Maybe we should check again before we go any further." "No." Harper's response was sharp, but the certainty in her tone was gone. "We're following procedure. We're doing the right thing." Marcus turned to Mitchell, his gaze cold but heavy with undeniable truth. "Mitchell, you know this is wrong. Don't let her drag you into it. Just run my plates. Check my identity. The truth will be clear in seconds." Mitchell looked away, but hesitation was written all over his face. Harper, though still trying to maintain control, was losing her grip on the moment. As Marcus was led toward the patrol car, the police lights cast shifting hues of red and blue across his face. The injustice of it all burned into the scene, unmistakable and undeniable. And in that moment, Marcus understood this was no longer just about him. This was something far bigger, something he had seen play out too many times in his courtroom. Now he was living it. Injustice does not wait for the truth. It thrives on power, prejudice, and fear. But Marcus Carter was not afraid, because he knew this was only the beginning of a fight he would not, and could not, lose. Harper leaned lightly against the patrol car, arms crossed over her chest, eyes locked on Marcus while Mitchell entered the information into the system. She wiped a thin sheen of sweat from her forehead, a small gesture, but one that betrayed the tension tightening around her. On the surface, she maintained an air of authority, resolute and unwavering. But inside, a storm churned. She could feel the weight of the neighborhood's eyes on her. Not just curiosity, judgment. Their stares pierced through her like 1,000 needles, each one pricking at the confidence she had once held so firmly. Then, like a wave crashing against the shore, a memory from 3 years ago surfaced. The face of the man that night, the luxury car, the fear that had gripped her, the way her pulse had pounded in her ears. She had never forgotten it. And yet now, looking at Marcus Carter, a thought she didn't want to entertain crept into her mind. What if she was wrong? What if her instincts, the ones she had trusted without question, were leading her astray? What if her judgment had been compromised, not by facts, but by fear? If she was wrong, this wasn't just about Marcus Carter. It was about everything she claimed to stand for. It was about the very integrity of the badge she wore. Mitchell stood silently beside her, his expression unreadable, but something in his posture, something almost imperceptible, suggested doubt. "Harper." His voice was softer now, almost a whisper. "Are you okay?" She turned to look at him. And for the briefest moment, in the dim glow of the flashing lights, there was something in her eyes that she couldn't quite hide. Uncertainty. "I don't know, Mitchell." Her voice was quieter now, as if she wasn't sure she even believed herself anymore. I don't know if I can tell right from wrong anymore. Mitchell was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured, careful. What do you see when you look at him? The black bag was still in his hand, its weight heavier than it should have been. His eyes flicked toward Marcus, who stood motionless, his hands still bound. It doesn't matter what I see. Harper's voice was cool again, a practice shield against her growing uncertainty. I have a job to do. The car matches the stolen vehicle report. We need to sort this out. Mitchell's jaw tightened slightly as he glanced back at Marcus. I don't know Harper. He doesn't look like the guy we're after. Harper turned to Mitchell, her voice dropping to a near whisper, as if she didn't want anyone else to hear. Listen, I can't afford another mistake. You know what happened last month? She hesitated, her gaze briefly falling to the pavement before she forced herself to regain her composure. I was reprimanded, Mitchell. The higher-ups want results, and this time, I can't risk my career. Mitchell said nothing, but he knew exactly what she was referring to. The botched car chase, the fallout, the disciplinary action that had nearly derailed her future. Since then, Harper had been fixated on proving herself, sometimes to the point of obsession. But he says he's a judge. Mitchell's tone was measured, careful. Don't you think that's worth verifying? Harper let out a dry, humorless laugh, her eyes flashing with skepticism. Anyone can claim to be a judge, a doctor, a damn astronaut. That doesn't mean a thing to me. What I see is a black man driving an Audi, the same model that was reported stolen last week. Mitchell heard the resolve in her voice, but he also heard something else. Something beneath the surface. Something deeper than just duty. Is there something else, Harper? His voice was gentle, probing. Harper hesitated, and then finally spoke, her gaze flickering with a memory from another time. 3 years ago, I was robbed. Her voice wavered slightly before she caught herself, forcing the emotion down. The guy was driving a luxury car, just like this one. He threatened me, and since then, I haven't been able to look at men like that without expecting the worst. Mitchell exhaled slowly. I get the pressure you're under, Harper, but we can't let bias dictate how we do our jobs. Harper tightened her arms around herself, as if shielding against something invisible. I'm not biased, Mitchell. I'm following protocol. But even as she said it, doubt gnawed at the edges of her certainty. She knew bias had seeped into her judgment, twisting the way she was handling this. Mitchell studied Harper for a long moment, recognizing that she wasn't just facing a suspect. She was facing her own fear, her own past. But could any of that justify what she was doing to an innocent man? He wasn't sure, and that uncertainty unsettled him. A few feet away, Marcus remained still, silently watching their conversation unfold. Every word exchanged, every hesitant glance, every flicker of uncertainty, each one was proof of the real reason he was standing here in cuffs. Not because of the car, not because of the black bag, but because prejudice was still pulling the strings of justice. The flashing police lights continued their relentless cycle, alternating between illuminating the firm resolve on Marcus's face and the silent turmoil flickering in Harper's eyes. The tension in the air felt stretched thin, a fragile wire poised to snap at the slightest pressure, the moment none of them wanted to come. Marcus inhaled deeply, letting the crisp night air fill his lungs. The metal cuffs bit into his wrists, leaving behind raw red imprints. But he stood tall, unwavering. The red and blue lights reflected off his face, casting a glow on his calm but unyielding expression. The face of a man who had fought countless battles in the courtroom, who had seen injustice take many forms. Across from him, Harper stood rigid, her stance defiant, but her slightest hesitations betrayed the uncertainty creeping into her mind. Officer Harper. Marcus's voice was low and steady, carrying the weight of a judge's authority, like the resounding crack of a gavel in a silent courtroom. You are making a grave mistake. All it takes is running the vehicle's information through the system, and this will be cleared up immediately. If you refuse, then call your superior. That is the correct and legal procedure. Harper crossed her arms tightly over her chest, trying to maintain her composure, but when she spoke, her voice lacked the unwavering confidence she needed. I know exactly what I'm doing, Mr. Carter. Her tone was sharp, but there was a tremor beneath it, barely perceptible. If you have nothing to hide, then you have nothing to worry about. Marcus raised an eyebrow, a flash of anger flickering across his face before he mastered it. "Worry," he repeated, enunciating each syllable with precise, deliberate sharpness, slicing through the thick air between them. "No, Harper, you should be the one worried. You are not just humiliating an innocent man. You are destroying your own reputation, your own career. Do you even understand that?" Harper hesitated, just for a second. But then, as if to conceal it, she tilted her chin up, her grip on her arms tightening. "I'm following protocol. If you don't like it, take it to court. You're playing with fire, Harper." Marcus leaned forward slightly, his voice cutting through the barricade of her defenses like a blade. "Do you not see it? A judge, in handcuffs, in the very community he has spent his life serving. Do you think this ends here? The media will swarm, attorneys will get involved, and you will answer for this. Don't let your pride turn tonight into a nightmare that never ends." Harper's eyes flicked quickly across the neighborhood. She saw them, the neighbors standing behind their windows, their eyes tracking every movement. Some held up their phones, the faint red dots on their screens signaling that they were recording. A bead of sweat rolled down her temple, despite the evening chill. She could feel the weight of their stares, the judgment, the scrutiny, the realization that every choice she made in this moment was shaping something far bigger than just this stop. Mitchell, standing nearby, recognized that the situation was spiraling beyond control. He stepped closer to Harper, his voice low but firm. "Harper, we can't stand here forever. He's only asking for one check. If he really is a judge, this is going to turn into a media disaster. We need to handle this the right way." Harper turned sharply to him, irritation flashing in her eyes. "I know what I'm doing, Mitchell." Her voice snapped, but she immediately heard the tremor beneath it, betraying the uncertainty creeping into her mind. "This isn't about bias." The words came out, but they sounded more like an attempt to convince herself than a firm declaration. Marcus hadn't looked away. His stare was unwavering, sharp as an invisible blade. "If this isn't about bias, then why not check? Just one call. Or are you afraid of what you'll find?" Harper clenched her fists, the air around her suddenly feeling suffocating. The murmurs from the gathering crowd grew louder. A small group of neighbors had begun to assemble on the sidewalk, their faces marked with open disapproval. She turned back to Mitchell, seeking some kind of validation, an ounce of reassurance. But he remained silent, his eyes steady, a quiet warning for her to tread carefully. "Do you know how close you are to the edge?" Marcus's voice was low, but his words carried the weight of a judge delivering a final caution. "One wrong move, and your career, your reputation, crumbles. But right now, you still have a chance to fix this." Harper stood frozen, the weight of every gaze pressing down on her like stones. Pride, fear, and duty waged war inside her, pulling her in two opposing directions, between what she had convinced herself was right and the undeniable truth staring back at her. Finally, with a heavy exhale, she reached for her radio. "Dispatch, request Captain Holloway at the scene." Her voice was thick with reluctant surrender. Marcus did not look satisfied. He remained motionless, his piercing gaze a silent reminder that she would have to answer for her decisions. The tension in the air was suffocating, stretched to its limit like a fraying wire, just waiting for the slightest spark to snap. Harper lowered the radio, her hands trembling slightly. She knew she had conceded, but she also understood that this wouldn't end easily. The weight of every watching eye bore into her, sharp as invisible blades slicing through her pride. She had done the right thing, but the cost of that choice might be greater than she had anticipated. Marcus stood firm, an unshaken figure in the middle of the storm. His unwavering stare bore into Harper, silently conveying an undeniable truth. Justice always comes at a price, but the truth will win in the end. A sudden creak of an opening window shattered the tense silence. A woman with silver-streaked hair and a resolute expression stepped out from the house nearby. Lai Martinez, a longtime neighbor of Marcus, was not someone who turned a blind eye to injustice. "Marcus, what the hell is going on?" Her voice rang sharp, slicing through the heavy air. She strode onto the sidewalk, her eyes blazing with indignation as they landed on Marcus, cuffed beside his Audi. "This is completely wrong," she declared, her glare shifting to Harper with unmistakable fury. "He's a judge, a respected man. I've lived here long enough to know he's done nothing wrong. What exactly do you think you're doing?" Harper turned toward Lai, her expression hardening. "Ma'am, please go back inside. This is a police investigation and does not concern you." But Lai didn't move. Instead, she turned to the gathering neighbors, her voice carrying conviction. "We cannot just stand here and let this happen." Her words rang out, urging those around her to action. "If we stay silent today, who will speak up when it happens to us?" The crowd swelled. More neighbors stepped forward. A young man, Jake, emerged from the group, holding up his phone. "I'm live streaming this." His voice was steady as he focused the camera. "Everyone's watching." He shifted his stance, his grip firm. "They want to know why a judge is being treated like this." Lai took a step closer, her expression unwavering. "We're not leaving until you release him." Her voice was clear, unshaken. "Or at the very least, explain yourselves, right here, in front of all of us." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, growing in volume, turning into an unspoken force pressing in on Harper. Harper's posture stiffened as she took in the rising number of onlookers. The situation was slipping beyond her control, and she knew it. Mitchell stepped closer, his voice low but weighted with meaning. "Harper, we need to stop. This isn't just about us anymore." The growing presence of the community pressed in on Harper, forcing her to reconsider every action, every word. The weight of public scrutiny settled heavily on her shoulders, a silent force she couldn't ignore. Lai, unfazed by Harper's earlier warnings, moved closer to Marcus, as if placing herself between him and the officers, a physical symbol of defiance, of protection. "You say this doesn't concern me?" Her voice was unwavering, each word slicing through the tension like a blade. "He's my neighbor. I know this man better than anyone here. You have no right to treat him this way without just cause." Her eyes locked onto Harper's with an intensity that made the officer's jaw tighten. "If you don't verify his identity right now, I will call an attorney." Harper narrowed her eyes, frustration flickering across her face. "Ma'am, I will say this one more time. This is a police matter. I need you to step back and stop interfering." But Lai didn't flinch. "Interfering?" Her voice was sharp, unwavering. "If you were doing your job correctly, no one would need to step in." She took a step forward, her presence only growing stronger. "Have you checked the vehicle registration? Or is this just a pathetic display of bias in the middle of our neighborhood?" Her words struck deep, fueling the already volatile air between them. Harper could feel the weight of every watching eye. More neighbors had stepped out of their homes, their phones raised, recording every second of the unfolding confrontation. Mitchell inched closer, his voice calm but firm. "We're drawing unnecessary attention. I think we need to call Captain Holloway as soon as possible." Harper clenched her jaw, her confidence faltering further. But she wasn't ready to back down just yet. "Let them record all they want. I'm just doing my job." Lai met Harper's stare head-on, her eyes burning with righteous anger. "Is your job to humiliate an innocent man in front of his own community?" She didn't wait for an answer. "If you don't release him immediately and apologize, I promise you, everyone here will know exactly how you handled this situation." Marcus turned to Lai, his voice calm but filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Lai. I truly appreciate your support. But please, stay safe. I'll handle this." Lai nodded slightly, but her stance remained firm. "Just remember, Marcus, you are not alone." Her words rang through the night, not just for Marcus, but as a warning to Harper. Harper felt the growing unease gnawing at her. She knew, now more than ever, that her next decision wouldn't just affect Marcus. It would define her career, her reputation, and her integrity. The glow from countless phone screens bathed the scene, capturing every decision Harper was about to make. Mitchell's stare bore into her, his disappointment unmistakable. "We need to handle this professionally. This is not the kind of story we want making headlines tomorrow." Harper stood motionless, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. Pride warred with the consequences that loomed before her. And then, in a moment of stark realization, she understood. Lai and the gathered community had shifted the entire dynamic. She was no longer just confronting Marcus. She was facing an entire neighborhood. Each second dragged out painfully as Harper stood at the precipice of a choice that could alter everything. She could feel the silent pressure of every watching eye, analyzing her, measuring her. No one was backing down. No one was turning away. Then, the sharp growl of an approaching engine shattered the charged silence. Every head turned toward the sound. A second patrol car pulled up, its flashing lights reflecting against nearby walls, casting eerie, flickering shadows across the pavement. A grim reminder of the gravity of this moment. The car door swung open. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a crisply pressed uniform stepped out, his expression unreadable but commanding. Captain Richard Holloway didn't need to speak to make his authority felt. But when his gaze swept across the scene and landed on Marcus Carter, standing handcuffed beside his Audi, something shifted in his composed demeanor, a flicker of shock, a trace of concern. Marcus Carter? His voice cut through the thick silence, ringing out like a gavel striking wood. The name wasn't just spoken as an acknowledgement. It was a reminder of who Marcus was, of the man now standing in the humiliating glare of police lights, stripped of dignity in the very community he had served. The weight of the moment sank in deeper. The murmurs in the crowd grew sharper. Holloway strode toward Harper and Mitchell, his stern gaze darkening with restrained disapproval. What the hell is going on here? Harper stiffened, but a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face before she forced herself back into composure. "Captain," she started, her voice firm, though an unsteady edge betrayed her, "this Audi matches the description of a stolen vehicle from last week. During the inspection, we found a suspicious bag inside. I believed an arrest was necessary to proceed with the investigation." Holloway's brow furrowed as he absorbed her words, scrutinizing every syllable. Then he turned to Marcus. For the first time that night, the gravity of the situation became fully visible in Holloway's eyes, a mixture of disbelief, concern, and something deeper. "Disappointment." "Harper," he said, his tone carrying a quiet, unmistakable weight, "Judge Carter is not just any citizen. He is one of the most respected men we know." Then his voice sharpened. "Did you verify his identity before proceeding with this?" Harper hesitated. A single moment of silence passed. That hesitation said everything. I don't know, Captain." Harper's voice had lost all confidence, shrinking under the weight of her own misjudgment. I didn't check." Holloway didn't wait for further explanation. "Remove the cuffs. Now." His voice was sharp, slicing through the tension like a blade. Mitchell didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and unlocked the handcuffs, the metal releasing with a distinct click. The cuffs dropped away, hitting the pavement with a soft clatter, a small sound, yet louder than any excuse Harper could have made. Marcus slowly moved his hands forward, rubbing the raw, reddened marks left behind. He was free, but there was no relief. He didn't step away. He didn't turn his back. His gaze remained locked onto Holloway, simmering with restrained fury, the kind of anger that doesn't erupt. It lingers, deep and steady, waiting. "Captain Holloway." His voice was slow, precise, each word weighted like a gavel striking wood. "What do you call this? A simple misunderstanding?" Holloway took a deep breath, visibly trying to maintain control over the unraveling situation. "Judge Carter, I sincerely apologize. This was a grave mistake. We will handle this immediately." "A mistake?" Marcus repeated, his voice slicing through the night like a blade. "And whose mistake was it, Captain?" "Harper's, for acting recklessly." He glanced at Harper, who stood rigid, her fists clenched at her sides. "Or is it the entire system you oversee, a system that allows bias to dictate actions instead of justice?" Holloway's shoulders tensed, his head dipping slightly under the crushing weight of Marcus's words. He knew Marcus was right, and he also knew the implications of what had just happened. This wasn't just about one officer making a bad call. This wasn't just a lapse in judgment. This was a crack in the very foundation of the system. And now, that crack had been exposed, under the unforgiving scrutiny of the public. "I assure you, I will personally handle this. What happened tonight does not represent this department as a whole." Marcus let out a sharp, bitter laugh, a sound laced with frustration and weary inevitability. "Doesn't represent the department?" His voice was cold, measured. "Captain, this isn't just some isolated incident. This is systemic. People like me deal with this every day. In this system, prejudice isn't just an oversight, it's a weapon." An invisible weight pressed down on Holloway, his posture sinking under the gravity of the moment. He turned to Harper, who remained frozen in place, her face pale, her body rigid with tension. "Harper," his voice was firm, edged with disappointment. "Did you verify the vehicle's registration?" Harper barely shook her head, her voice nearly inaudible. "I was going to, Captain, but you didn't." Holloway cut her off, his tone sharp as steel. "And because of that, you will be held accountable." Marcus took a step forward, his eyes locked on Holloway, unwavering. "Captain, I don't care for empty apologies or meaningless promises. I want to know, right now, how this system is going to change to ensure that what happened tonight never happens again, not just to me, but to anyone." Silence wrapped itself around Holloway. He could feel the weight of the stairs bearing down on him, the community, his own officers, and, most of all, a man who had long grown weary of injustice repeating itself. "I promise you," Holloway's voice was steady but slow, each word measured. "There will be consequences. Harper will be held responsible for her actions, and I will personally make sure no one else has to endure what you just did." Marcus didn't respond right away. He studied Holloway, his gaze piercing, unrelenting, searching for cracks in the captain's resolve. "I will hold you to that." His voice was cold, each word landing with deliberate weight. "But understand this, Captain, your promises won't be judged by words alone, but by action. And I've heard too many promises like this before." Holloway nodded, but he knew this had already spiraled far beyond a single officer's mistake. This wasn't just a personal failure. This was a reckoning. A harsh reminder that the very system he had sworn to uphold was fractured, riddled with cracks too deep to ignore. Marcus Carter, with his unwavering stance and unshakable voice, had forced him to confront that truth. But just as Holloway thought he had begun to take control of the situation, a shift in the air signaled otherwise. The moment he stepped forward to address the crowd, his stance instinctively aligning with Harper, his words betrayed him. "Judge Carter, I believe my officers were carrying out their duties appropriately. If there was no unlawful activity, you should have simply complied." The words barely left his mouth before the crowd erupted. Marcus's eyes burned with fury as he locked onto Holloway. "Do you even hear yourself, Captain? You are defending an abuse of power in front of an entire community." Angry voices surged from the crowd. "Captain, we have proof." Jake's voice rang out as he lifted his phone higher, the live stream still broadcasting to an audience that was growing by the second. "The world is watching, and we won't stay silent." For the first time that night, Holloway hesitated. He could feel the pressure shifting, no longer confined to the people standing before him, but expanding outward, through screens, through social media, through a force that even his badge couldn't control. His voice softened, his tone no longer just authoritative, but cautious. "I will personally investigate and ensure everything is brought to light." But Holloway's initial hesitation had already sealed his fate in the eyes of the community. To them, he was no different from Harper, just another cog in a machine that protected its own at the expense of justice. Marcus remained still, his silence heavier than any words. He didn't need to say anything more. His gaze alone carried an unshakable truth. The system was broken, and this time it would not be hidden. Mitchell stood on the sidelines, an observer in a conflict far greater than any individual. But Harper could no longer conceal the turmoil unraveling inside her. "Captain Holloway." Marcus's voice was low, yet it commanded absolute attention. "A private apology cannot erase what happened tonight. This is not just a personal matter between me and your officers. This is about the system you represent and its relationship with this community." Holloway tensed at the words, but he quickly steadied himself. "I understand your anger, Judge Carter." His tone was conciliatory, his posture carefully neutral. "I assure you, this will be handled through the proper internal review process. The mistakes made tonight will not be ignored." Marcus arched an eyebrow, his expression unwavering. "Internal review?" His voice was sharp, each syllable slicing through the charged air. "Captain, I have seen too many cases buried under the excuse of internal review. No, that is not enough. I want transparency. I want you to publicly acknowledge the failures of your officers in front of this community. And I want a clear plan of action, steps that will be taken to ensure this never happens again." Holloway hesitated. His gaze swept over the watching neighbors, many of whom still had their phones raised, capturing every moment. This had already spiraled beyond his control. Every decision he made now would not only shape his own reputation, but could also send shockwaves through the entire department. "Judge Carter." Holloway spoke carefully, deliberately choosing each word. "I understand what you're asking, but if I take this public, it could undermine not just my department, but the community's trust in the justice system as a whole." Marcus let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Trust?" His voice was cold, devoid of any amusement. "You truly believe this community still has faith in a system that turned me into a suspect tonight simply because of the color of my skin? Trust isn't built by concealing mistakes, Captain. It comes from confronting them and making them right, out in the open." Holloway remained silent, the weight of Marcus's words pressing down on him. A wave of helplessness settled in his chest. an unsettling realization that no matter how carefully he tried to control the situation, the truth had already escaped beyond his grasp. He turned to Harper. She stood motionless, as if frozen in place. Her face was blank, but her eyes betrayed something deeper, a turmoil she could no longer suppress. She had said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. Marcus shifted his gaze toward her, his stare razor-sharp. "Do you have anything to say, Officer Harper? Or are you going to keep hiding behind your superior?" Harper blinked. Her lips parted slightly, as if she was about to speak. But no words came. For the first time that night, she felt utterly powerless. She wanted to justify herself. She wanted to explain. But she knew nothing she said could erase what she had done. Her body remained rigid, trapped under Marcus's icy stare, Holloway's authoritative presence, and the flashing lights from countless phones capturing every second of this reckoning. The weight of her actions wrapped around her like a storm she could not outrun. Her mind spun in chaos, torn between her ingrained beliefs and the undeniable truth before her. She knew she was wrong, but how could she admit it? Bowing her head to Marcus, to this entire community, wasn't just about apologizing. It would mean unraveling everything she had believed about herself. She searched Marcus's eyes, hoping desperately for some trace of mercy. But all she found was restrained fury. A quiet, justified rage that she could not deny. Harper swallowed, her throat painfully dry. "Captain." Her voice wavered, stripped of the cold authority it once held. I think we need to address this openly in front of the community. That's our responsibility." Holloway, sensing the escalating tension, spoke with a measured, conciliatory tone, an attempt to temper Marcus's fire before it burned beyond control. "Judge Carter, you're right. We will hold a public press conference to acknowledge our mistakes. I also commit to implementing training and reforms to ensure that nothing like this ever happens again." Marcus nodded slowly, but his gaze remained like steel. "I will be watching your actions closely, Captain. And let me warn you, if I see even the slightest hint of dishonesty or an attempt to bury this, I will take this story straight to the media. I have nothing to lose." "But you do." Marcus's words echoed through the heavy night air, a final warning that cemented the gravity of the moment. Holloway nodded, accepting the weight of the confrontation in silence. He knew this wasn't over. Marcus wouldn't stop until he saw real, tangible change. Harper remained motionless, drowning in her own shame. The bitter reality of her choices bore down on her, choices that hadn't just humiliated Marcus but had shaken the very foundation she once believed she was protecting. In the days that followed, the events of that night spread like wildfire across social media. The footage of Judge Marcus Carter, a respected figure, handcuffed and treated like a criminal, captured the public's outrage. Comments, shares, and waves of condemnation flooded online platforms. Hashtags demanding justice and equality exploded, turning Marcus's story into more than just a personal experience. It became a symbol of a far greater issue, the deep-rooted injustice and bias in law enforcement. Marcus recognized that this was an opportunity, a moment to push for real change. He organized a community forum at the local cultural center, not just to set the record straight, but to spark a deeper conversation about issues that extended far beyond his own ordeal, issues that had affected millions. The large hall of the cultural center was packed. Seats were filled to capacity, with more people standing along the walls. The crowd was not just made up of local residents but also journalists, activists, and those drawn by the need to understand the story that had shaken the public. Marcus stepped onto the stage, his gaze sweeping across the audience, feeling both the support and the weight of their expectations. "Thank you all for being here today." His voice carried through the room, warm yet resolute. "What happened to me that night wasn't just an individual mistake. It was a reflection of a much deeper systemic issue, the way we judge each other based on prejudice and false assumptions." He recounted his experience, the humiliation, the anger, and the injustice, but he didn't dwell on the past. He shifted the focus to action. We cannot change what happened, but we can make sure that the future does not repeat those mistakes. We have the power to shape what comes next. And that starts with acknowledging our failures and committing to correcting them. His voice, steady and strong, filled every corner of the crowded room. Among the crowd, Harper sat quietly in the back row, her head slightly bowed, her expression unreadable. As Marcus finished his speech, he did something unexpected. He invited her to speak. The room fell into a heavy silence. Every eye turned toward Harper. She could feel the weight of their expectations, their judgment, and their doubt pressing down on her like an unspoken force. Slowly, she stood and walked toward the front. She didn't just offer an apology. She laid out a plan for real change. I am committed to undergoing implicit bias training and working with this community to establish regular discussions between law enforcement and residents." She paused, her eyes meeting Marcus's. "But words aren't enough. Starting tomorrow, I will lead an initiative to rebuild trust between the police and this community. This isn't just about making amends, it's about creating something better." A hush settled over the room. Skepticism lingered in some faces, but others nodded subtly, as if trying to decide whether they could believe in this change. Harper continued, her voice steady but reflective. She spoke of the pressures she had faced after past incidents, the fear of losing her career, and the biases she had once been blind to in herself. But pressure is not an excuse. Bias has no place in the work of a police officer. She scanned the room, taking in the thoughtful, guarded expression staring back at her. "What I've come to understand most," she said, her voice slowing, "is that bad decisions don't just hurt others, they force us to confront who we really are. That night, I didn't just wrong Judge Carter. I undermined the very values I thought I was protecting, justice." Her voice strengthened. "I can't undo what happened, but I can commit to learning from it. And I don't just want to change myself. I want to help build a system that is truly fair." Her gaze returned to Marcus, a silent acknowledgement that it was he who had forced her to reckon with her actions. "Thank you, Judge Carter, for holding me accountable." Silence filled the room. But it wasn't the silence of judgment. It was the silence of contemplation, of understanding. Marcus gave a slight nod. He didn't speak, but his expression said enough. He understood. And more than that, he recognized this as the first step toward the change he had long hoped to see. Harper's words, while incapable of undoing the past, carried a sincerity that left many in the room deep in thought. She had committed herself not just to personal accountability, but to broader systemic change within the police force. The community meeting ended, but the story did not. The footage of Marcus being handcuffed under the flashing red and blue lights of a police car was not just shared, it became the center of a national conversation. Hashtags like #JusticeForMarcus and #IndBiasInPolicing began trending, igniting widespread discussions on social media. Articles, opinion pieces, and thousands of comments flooded the internet, calling for real police reform. In one viral video, George, a longtime resident of Woodridge Heights, spoke out. "This isn't just Marcus's story. This is all of our story, a testament to the urgent need for a system that is fair, a system where bias has no place. We, the residents of Woodridge Heights, will not stay silent." The growing outrage across social media forced the police department into action. A public press conference was scheduled, an attempt to address the community's demands for accountability. Harper, despite her personal commitment to change, still faced intense scrutiny. The eyes of the public were now locked on her, watching, waiting to see if her words would translate into real action. Meanwhile, in interviews, Marcus did not just speak about his own experience. He emphasized something much larger. Change does not come from apologies. It comes from action. Change comes from transparency and accountability, not empty words. But the story did not end with a community meeting or a press conference. It became something more, a wake-up call, a reminder of the power of unity and responsibility in the fight for justice. Marcus felt a flicker of hope, but he knew hope was fragile. It had to be sustained by action, by persistence. This fight was far from over. It would not be won in a single night. It was just one chapter in a much longer struggle. But he was ready to face it, not just for himself, but for the countless others who had, were, and would continue to face injustice. As night settled over the neighborhood, Woodridge Heights slowly returned to its usual stillness. But the echoes of that evening remained. A spark had been lit, fueling a movement greater than any one individual. And Marcus, with steady steps, walked into the darkness, not as someone retreating, but as a man forging the path forward. The story of Marcus Carter is more than just one man's experience. It reflects a reality that many continue to face. What do you think about how Marcus handled this situation? If you were in his position, what would you have done? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters. Your perspective can inspire and help shift the conversation on justice and bias. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and spread the message to your friends and family. Conversations about fairness and accountability are what drive real change. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel to stay connected. More stories like this are coming, stories that just might change the way you see the world. Thank you for watching and supporting this journey toward awareness and transformation. Let's take steps toward change, one story at a time. Thank you for supporting this channel. Like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on the latest content. These stories are collected from various sources and are not intended to represent any specific individual or organization. They are shared to promote awareness of human values and have been rewritten with AI-assisted storytelling. If any details are inaccurate, we appreciate your understanding. Wishing you all the best in life.